Namaste and welcome back to OM Dharma YouTube channel. This is chapter 8 of the Bhagavad Gita series. The links to the other chapters have been provided in the description box. In this video, we are going to give verse by verse explanation of chapter 8, which is Akshar Brahma Yoga. So watch the video till the end, hit the like button if you like it, consider subscribing to OM Dharma for receiving regular updates, and don't forget to share the video with your loved ones. In this chapter, Shri Krishna briefly describes several significant concepts and terms that the Upanishads expound in detail. He also explains what decides the destination of the soul after death. He says that if we remember God at the time of death, we can definitely attain Him. Therefore, alongside doing our daily works, we must always practice thinking of God. We can do this by thinking of His qualities, attributes, virtues, etc. A persistent yogic meditation upon God by chanting His names is also a good practice. Through exclusive devotion, when our mind is perfectly absorbed in Him, we will elevate from the material dimension to the spiritual realm. Lord Krishna then talks about the various abodes in the material realm and the cycle of creation. He further explains how the multitudes of beings manifest on these abodes. And at the time of dissolution, everything absorbs back into Him. However, the divine abode of God is untouched by the cycle of creation and dissolution. Those who progress on the path of light finally reach the divine abode and never return to the material world, whereas those fallen souls who tread the path of darkness endlessly keep transmigrating in the cycle of birth, old age, sickness, and death. In verse number 8.1, Arjuna asks, what is it that Brahma, what is adhyatma, what is karma, O Supreme Person, what is termed as adibhut and adidaiva? Lord Krishna ended the previous chapter by referencing some technical terms and stressed the need for Arjuna to understand these terms completely so that he could realize Ishwar. Here, Arjuna does a favor to all future students of the Gita by asking Lord Krishna to clearly define these terms. In that regard, Arjuna asks the definition of four terms in the shlok: Adhyatma, Karma, Adibhut, and Adidev. This chapter is perhaps one of the most philosophical and esoteric chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. It deals with the theme of life after death, something that has not been addressed so far in the Gita. We will also get a sweeping glimpse of the Gita's view on the origin of the cosmos. Further in 8.2, Arjuna asks, who is Adi Yagna and how is he established in this body? O Madhusudan, how are you known by a self-controlled person at the time of departure? Arjuna concludes his rounds of question to Lord Krishna in this shlok. He has two queries here. Firstly, he wants to know what is Adi Yagna and where it can be found. Secondly, he wants to know how can a yogi or a self-controlled person remember Ishwar at the time of departure. Lord Krishna treats the second question as the most important question. After answering the first 6 questions in the next 2 shlokas, Lord Krishna devotes the remainder of the chapter to answer only this question. So in verse number 8.3, Lord Krishna says, Brahm is the imperishable supreme. Adhyatma is individual nature. Karma is defined as the force that produces the existence of beings. First, Lord Krishna answers the question, what is Brahma? He says that Brahma is the imperishable, supreme, eternal essence that we encountered in the chapter 2. What is Adhyatma is answered next. And he says that it is Swabhav, or the set of qualities of an individual. Each person in this world has a unique combination of attributes, a unique permutation of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas that is their own. When the universal eternal essence is conditioned or covered by an individual's attributes, it is known as Adhyatma or Atma. Lastly, Lord Krishna says, what is karma? He says that it is the force that brings about the creation of every entity in this universe. It is the force that converts an unmanifested object into a manifested object. For instance, we can say that Ishwar set into motion this entire universe with one original action that has resulted into the millions and millions of actions that occur in the universe every second. It was the seed of all future actions in the universe. But our ego, our false sense of individuality, comes under the delusion that it is the doer of all actions. Each such individualistic action causes us to further identify with our body and go further from liberation. Ultimately, everything that is unmanifested will become manifested and will be dissolved, only to start all over again. So continuing in verse number 8.4, Lord Krishna says, Adibhut is perishable existence, Adidaiv is the person, and I only am Adiyagna in this body, O eminent among the embodied. Now let us start with the definition of Adibhut, which the sloka terms as perishable existence. It refers to everything in the universe that is visible and is going to come to an end one day or the other. Now just for instance, the room you're sitting in, the chair or other furniture, your computer or your mobile phone, all the things comprise of Adibhut. Let us look at the definition of Adidaiva next. Literally, it is defined as Purush or person in the shlok, but what it really means is the creative or intelligent principle that resides within every living and non-living object in this universe. It determines the fate of the universe and holds the universe together. So what is meant by Adiyagna? Lord Krishna says that this world of activity and relationships is termed as Adiyagna. Now we come to the key point. Addressing Arjuna fondly as eminent among the embodied, Lord Shri Krishna asserts that Adhyatma, Adidev, Adibhut and Karma are nothing but Ishwar. Ishwar and Brahma are the same. It is just that one is with form and another is formless. So in verse number 8.5 he says, one who, even during the time of departure, abandons his body while remembering me, he achieves my true nature. In this matter, there is no doubt. The remainder of this chapter is the answer to the fundamental questions raised by Arjuna. How does one attain Ishwar at the time of death? Having addressed all the other questions, Lord Krishna begins to answer the most important question in the shlok. He says that only the one who remembers Ishwar at the time of death will attain Ishwar. We now have a definite plan of action from Lord Krishna. He asserts that our final goal in life should be to remember Ishwar at the time of death. Lord Krishna assures it is so because he says, in this matter there is no doubt. It is clearly spelled out for us. At first glance it may seem straightforward. All we have to do is to remember Ishwar at the time of death. But it is not so. In most cases we may not know when we die. We could die in an accident, we could have lost our mental abilities, our attachment towards family will occupy our minds. There are so many factors that will prevent us from remembering Ishwar only at the time of death. So then how do we get around this problem? Lord Krishna addresses it shortly. First, he explains why our thought at the time of death is so important. So in 8.6 he says, when one thinks of whatever state while leaving the body at the end, O Kaunteya, one always having been absorbed in that, attains only that. The Shrimad Bhagavad contains the story of great king Bharat. He was an accomplished king. He ran his kingdom well during his lifetime and later retired into the forest to lead a life of austerity. But he developed a soft corner for a baby deer and became so attached to it that he would only think of the deer instead of focusing on his austerities. It is said that in his next life he was born as a deer. In this shlok, Lord Krishna asserts that whatever we think about at the time of death will determine our fate. But more importantly, he also states that the thought at the time of death is not really something that we can control. It is in fact an outcome of our pattern of thinking throughout our lives. If we examine our thoughts over the course of our day, we will notice a great variety of thinking. For most of us, it will be a mix of mostly family-related and work-related thoughts, mixed with some thoughts about spirituality. But in the background, we'll always have a thought that is going on all the time. It'll come to the forefront when we are alone or when we have opened our eyes after sleeping, but not fully woken up. Now, for King Bharat, that persistent background thought was that of a deer. So then our deepest love, our deepest interest, and our deepest longing will bear fruit in our next life. In verse number 8.7, he begins explaining how to deal with this problem, and he says, "Therefore, remember me at all times and fight. One who offers his mind and intellect to me attains me without a doubt." Here, Lord Krishna instructs us to remember Ishwar at all times and perform our duties. We are not asked to give up our duties, retire to a forest and constantly think of Ishwar there. Lord Krishna wants us to first remember Ishwar and then perform our duty consistent with our Swadharma. The result of leading such a life is that we will attain Ishwar certainly. There is no doubt in this matter. Typically, we confine meditation to something that we do for 15 to 30 minutes, sitting in a solitary place as instructed in the 6th chapter. We now realize that those instructions were meant to prepare us for the kind of meditation that Sri Krishna wants us to pursue 24/7, that is, meditation of Ishwar. How can this be possible? Our mind can only think of one thought at a time. So the way to meditate continuously is to somehow understand that everything we see, we do, and we know is Ishwar. Now we understand why Lord Krishna defined the terms Brahma, Karma, Adibhut, Adidaiva, Adhyatma, Adiyagna at the beginning of the chapter. Because all those are nothing but Ishwar. If while performing any action we know that the actor, the action, the instrument, the process and the result, everything is Ishwar, we will never forget Ishwar. Even if this kind of thinking is not possible for us in the beginning, we can emulate the mind of a mother who, regardless of what she is doing, always thinks about her child in the background. By practicing meditation on our favorite deity, we develop an attachment to it, so that we can recall it every time we feel distant from Ishwar. So therefore, by practicing meditation constantly on Ishwar, we should strive to change our thinking such that our final thought will be nothing but Ishwar. This constant meditation upon Ishwar is called Upasana. In verse number 8.8 he says, "With the mind engaged in constant practice of yoga, not diverting from it, contemplating the Supreme Divine Person, one attains Ishwar, O Parth." Here in the shlok he recalls the technique that was presented to us in the 6th chapter, which is Abhyas Yoga. In this technique, the mind is trained to focus exclusively on one thing. If it diverts to something else, then we bring it back to our object of meditation. We can meditate upon any form of Ishwar that we have a closeness to. It could be Lord Shiva, Lord Hanuman, Lord Ram, Krishna, or any other deity. The deity should come to our mind effortlessly. There is no compulsion to choose one over the other. But as discussed earlier, we should be clear that the deity is an indicator or a pointer to Ishwar. We should not get stuck at the level of the deity we've chosen. So in 8.9 he says, "He who is omniscient, timeless, the commander, subtler than the subtle, protector of all, incomprehensible, brilliant like the sun, beyond darkness, one contemplates him." Here Ishwar is described as Anushasitaram, which means one who controls everything, who has final authority over everything. He is also Sarvasya Dataram, one who maintains and ordains everything, one who distributes the results of everyone's action. In other words, Ishwar comprises the set of laws that hold the entire universe together. Lord Krishna also cautions us with regard to giving a lot of importance to the visual form of Ishwar. He describes Ishwar to be smaller or subtler than the smallest particle we can comprehend. He is not visible to our senses or to the most powerful of microscopes. He is also Achintya Rupam. His form is incomprehensible. He can never be made into an object because he is our own self, the subject. but symbolically comparing Ishwar to the sun, which is Aditya Varnam, Lord Krishna indicates that our senses cannot comprehend Ishwar's brilliance. It is the light that drives away darkness and ignorance. We should try to contemplate on this form of Ishwar throughout our lives so that we can remember this picture during our final moments. In verse number 8.10, he continues to say, "At the time of departure, endowed with devotion, an unwavering mind, as well as the power of yoga, fully establishing the pranas in the center of the eyebrows, he attains that supreme divine person." The Puranas contain several stories describing how people endowed with yogic powers could control their life force or their prana and force it out of the body. At the end of MAHABHARAT, many people including Yudhishthir and Draupadi left their bodies through yogic prowess. If we interpret this shlok literally, it describes how one can remember Ishwar's form while voluntarily starting the process of departing the body. We, of course, do not know anything about such techniques, nor do we wish to pursue it. So therefore, let us examine the symbolic meaning of the shlok. Pranay kale literally means the time of departure or death. Symbolically, it signifies the death of the ego or the end of our notion of finitude. Therefore, when we rid ourselves of selfish desires, likes and dislikes, and in doing so slay the ego, we automatically develop firm devotion or bhakti towards Ishwar. As our devotion increases, our mind's tendency to jump from one thought to the other slows down, settling into the one thought of Ishwar. We can then meditate on the form of Ishwar as the supreme divine person or Param Purush. All the energy that would normally have been wasted in selfish thinking and action is available to us now. We can channel this reservoir of energy towards meditation. So therefore, if we use these instructions to develop the daily habit of meditating upon Ishwar, we will naturally and easily remember Ishwar when it is time for us to leave this world. The key thing, of course, is not to forcibly practice meditation, but to gradually ease into it as our level of devotion to Ishwar increases. With this shlok, Lord Krishna concludes the topic of meditation to Ishwar's form. The topic of meditation on Ishwar's name is taken up in verse 8.11, which reads, "That which is declared imperishable by the knowers of the Vedas, that which dispassionate sages enter, that whose desire leads them to engage in the study of Brahma. For you, I shall speak of that goal in summary." Now, having spoken of the technique of meditating upon Ishwar's form, Lord Krishna now begins the topic of meditating upon Ishwar's name. The shlok is written in the style of the Upanishads and is, before the actual technique of meditation is described, Lord Krishna highlights the qualifications of the seeker who is about to perform this meditation. He should be free of selfish desires, likes and dislikes, indicated by the word vitaragraha. We have already encountered this word under the topic of Karma Yoga. Strong passions or dislikes become obstacles in meditation as they push the mind to jump from one thought to the other. Only one who has managed to control the mind can perform such meditation. The seeker should also possess a strong desire to inquire into the knowledge of the eternal essence, indicated by the word brahmachari. Now, the typical meaning of this word celibacy is not used here. It is used to indicate one who moves around or is preoccupied with the study of Brahma or the eternal essence. Most of us, however, are preoccupied with actions. We are karmacharis. Preoccupation with action will also become an obstacle in meditation, as we've already seen in the 6th chapter. Endowed with these qualifications, the seeker is ready to meditate upon that which is considered as the ultimate goal, the imperishable Ishwar or Aksharam. What is the process by which one can perform this meditation? This is taken up in the next two shlokas. So 8.12 reads, "Controlling all the gates, confining the mind within the heart and establishing one's pranas in the forehead, situated in yogic concentration." Lord Krishna describes the technique of meditating upon the name of Ishwar in the shlok. He outlines a series of steps which are similar to the detailed analysis of meditation found in the 6th chapter. 4 steps are presented here: controlling the organs of sense perception, reducing the number of thoughts to 1, directing the life force or pran, and continuing to remain in the state for concentration of an extended period of time. The first step is to control the organs of sense perception, referred to here as gates. In meditation, we are advised to select a spot where there is minimal distraction so that the mind does not rush out into the external world towards sound or image or smell. The second step is to confine the mind within the heart. This means that we have to slowly reduce the number of thoughts to 1, using japa meditation, for instance. No other thought should enter the mind except the object of meditation. The third and fourth steps require the oversight and training of an experienced master. For the sake of completeness, let's examine them anyway. An advanced yogi has the ability to control his pran or life force so that it could be focused in one part of the body. Here, such a yogi is asked to focus his life force in the forehead. Once this happens, the yogi is asked to maintain this position for an extended period of time. Such intense meditation requires tremendous effort and practice. Further, 8.13 reads, "He who departs the body while chanting Om, which is the one-syllable name of Brahma, and also remembers me, he attains the supreme state." The sound Om has been praised in the scriptures as an indicator of Brahma, the eternal essence. Lord Krishna concludes the second technique of meditation on the name of Ishwar, by saying that one who performs meditation on the sound of Om attains Ishwar during their time of departure. Like we saw in the previous instance, the symbolic meaning of this slok also uses death as metaphor to indicate death of the ego. Therefore, meditation on the sound of Om helps the seeker sever his connection to the finite ego and take him towards the infinite eternal essence. The key thing, however, is to associate the sound Om to our understanding of Ishwar. In other words, meditation of the sound of Om without associating it to our favorite deity will not yield any result. Just to recap, the first technique was meditation upon grand cosmic form of Ishwar, and the second technique was meditation upon Om. However, both techniques require us to develop control of our prans. Recognizing this, Lord Krishna provides an easier third technique in verse number 8.14, which reads, "One who thinks of me in a focused mind without interruption, I become effortlessly available to that yogi that is constantly engaged in me." Lord Krishna provides us with the simplest method of gaining access to Ishwar in this shlok. He says that no special technique is required. All that is needed is that the seeker focus his mind on Ishwar, perform duties as per his swadharma, but think about Ishwar all the time without interruption. The key point, however, is the phrase "without interruption." We'd seen earlier that there is one thought that all of us have in the back of our minds. For some it is family, for some others it is career, and for some it is something else. Lord Krishna says that unless we make Ishwar that constant background thought, we will not attain him. Just performing a 30-minute meditation on Ishwar is not going to yield anything. Ishwar is very well aware that most of us do not give him top priority. This is famously depicted in the image of Lord Vitthal, a deity of Lord Vishnu. He is portrayed as standing with hands on his waist as if to say, "I've been waiting here for a long time. When will you come?" This is due to our preoccupation with worldly matters. A deep-seated attraction towards spiritual knowledge combined with blows from the world will slowly but surely move the seeker towards constant meditation upon Ishwar. So therefore, Lord Krishna has provided a simple and straightforward method to attain Ishwar. Keep Ishwar as the constant thought, but do your duty. It does not require us to perform any kind of specialized yogic meditation. What happens when we follow this path is explained in verse number 8.15, which reads, "Having obtained me, these esteemed do not attain rebirth. their transient abode of sorrow. They attain the goal of supreme success. What happens if we diligently meditate upon Ishwar while performing our duties? Lord Krishna provides the answer to this question in the shlok. He says that such people do not attain rebirth after they die. They attain something much higher. They attain Ishwar himself. First, let us examine how Lord Krishna describes our present condition. Our worldly existence is transient, which means that there is no sense of permanence. Look at our body. It grows from a small baby all the way into an adulthood and old age. There is not one moment where it is the same. Similarly, all aspects of our life are impermanent. Therefore, Lord Krishna summarizes our existence in one word, dukkhalaya, or abode of sorrow. It is a constant quest for happiness throughout impermanence, which is like trying to hold on to a bubble. Most people are well entrenched in this pursuit, thinking that it is normal. But some have figured out the fallacy in this pursuit and have begun their journey towards Ishwar. They are referred to as Mahatmas, or esteemed individuals, in the shlok. Those who sincerely pursue this path attain the supreme goal, Ishwar himself. If we get Ishwar, we will not get revisit the world ever again. It is like waking up from a dream. We will not get to go back. So if we hold on to the world, we will never get Ishwar. It is an either-or situation. So therefore, once we decide that our goal is Ishwar and develop dispassion or vairagya towards the world, we should diligently pursue Karma Yoga combined with meditation as prescribed by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Here, Lord Krishna concludes the topic of attainment of Ishwar through meditation. The topic around creation and dissolution of the universe is taken up next. So, in verse number 8.16, Lord Krishna says, O Arjun, all worlds, including the abode of Brahma, are subject to return, but having obtained me, rebirth does not occur. Now, according to the scriptures, there exist heavens or worlds subtler than our visible universe. All beings on this earth who perform meritorious deeds go to one of those heavens after death. The abode of Lord Brahma, which is Brahmalok, is considered the highest among the heavens. Lord Krishna says that all beings who end up in these heavens, including the world of Lord Brahma, do not stay there permanently. They have to return to the earth at some point. Only those who attain Ishwar gain permanent liberation. The first half of the shlok is applicable to seekers who perform Karma Yoga diligently and worship Ishwar as well. Depending upon the sincerity of their deeds and worship, they will attain the appropriate heaven. A select few attain the abode of Lord Brahma, which is the highest possible heaven. Here it is said that the residents only enjoy pleasure. There is no sorrow or suffering or whatsoever. Once they attain the abode of Lord Brahma, they are faced with a choice. They can continue to remain interested in pleasure seeking or attain liberation. The attainment of Ishwar is the same as liberation. If they continue to remain interested in pleasure seeking, if they think of Brahmalok as yet another realm of space and time, they will eventually come back to earth and start life all over again. If they are interested in liberation, they will attain it when Brahmalok is dissolved along with all of the other worlds. This kind of liberation is called Karma Mukti. Now the question that arises is, why do all of these worlds end? The topic of cosmic creation and dissolution is taken up next. So in 8.17, Lord Krishna says, They who know the day of Brahm comprising 1,000 yugas, the night of Brahma comprising 1,000 yugas, those people know day and night. We now enter into the topic of cosmic creation with the shlok. Before the topic is taken up, Lord Krishna introduces some words here as a way of introduction. The new words introduced here are Sahasra and Yug. Although not mentioned explicitly, we shall also look at the 4 yugs or ages that are part of the cosmic creation. The Satyug, Treta Yug, Dwapar Yug and Kali Yug. The cycle of creation is said to begin with Satyug or the age of truth. It is followed by the Treta Yug and Dwapar Yug. The last Yug is Kali Yug or the age of discord, which is the current Yug that we are living in. Kali Yuga is the shortest yuga, which comprises of 432,000 years. Dwapar is twice that long, Treta is thrice that long, and Satyuga is 4 times that long. Therefore, the total time of creation is 10 times 432,000, which is 4.32 million years. This period of creation is also known as Chaturyuga. Now, having understood the length of Chaturyuga, we can calculate the length of Brahma's day and night. Lord Krishna says that one day of Lord Brahma equals 1,000 yugas. The interpretation of the word yug here is traditionally taken to mean Chaturyuga. So then, a day of Brahma equals 1,000 times 4.32 million, which is 4.32 billion. This is also the length of one night of Lord Brahma. Let us now dig deeper into the symbolic meaning of this shlok. There are 2 aspects we need to look at. First, the shlok re-emphasizes that every action we perform always bears fruit, but not necessarily in the current time frame. We may try and try very hard, but the result of our action may not show up in this lifetime. It may bear fruit in another lifetime. Alternatively, we may sometimes get into situations that we think we do not deserve. These could be favorable situations, for instance, an unexpected financial windfall, or unfavorable situations, like a natural disaster. These types of results are due to actions we've performed in prior lifetime. The second aspect is to do with the cultivation of dispassion or vairagya towards this world. We perform action in this world not just for immediate gain, but also to leave behind a legacy, leave behind something that future generations will remember us by. It could be wealth, power, prestige, whatever. But in effect, Lord Krishna tells us that nothing will last forever. Everything will eventually end, if not now, then certainly in 4.32 billion years. So if this is going to be the case, it is better to cultivate dispassion right now so that we can proceed spiritually. So verse number 8.18 reads, with the start of day, the entire manifest universe is produced from the unmanifest. With the start of night, it is dissolved into that which is called the unmanifest. Lord Krishna explains the process of cosmic creation in the shlok. When the day of Lord Brahma begins, the entire universe comprising all living and non-living entities wake up and begin to act. This process continues until the end of his day. Then the whole universe goes back into the unmanifest state that is sprung from. Alternatively, the whole universe is born out of Lord Brahma, the unmanifest, and goes back to him. Now let us examine the implications. The universe is never really destroyed. It goes into a state of suspended animation, only to be unfrozen when the next day of Lord Brahma begins. This is consistent with the law of conservation of energy and matter. Neither energy nor matter is created or destroyed. They just transform from one state to another. If we know this, and if we also know that every action that we perform always yields a result sooner or later, we realize that the universe works on a set of well-defined laws. Nothing is random. Everything is an effect of some earlier cause. Therefore, we can begin to develop the right set of expectation towards world. Then while performing actions in a spirit of Karma Yoga, we will know that only performance of actions is in our hand. The universe, with its set of built-in laws, will take care of the rest. There is no room for worry. Now, do the living and non-living beings have a choice in this process of creation and dissolution? Let's see in 8.19, which reads, that same collection of beings which was created repeatedly helplessly dissolves during the night, O Parth, and is again created during the day. We learned about the process of cosmic creation where all the living and non-living beings in the universe become unmanifest at the beginning of the day of Lord Brahma. Now Lord Krishna elaborates on the dissolution aspect. He says that all those beings go into an unmanifest state during the night of Lord Brahma. The very same beings become manifest again when the day of Lord Brahma begins. As we saw earlier, nothing is ever created nor destroyed. The very same set of beings become manifest and unmanifest. The total number of beings in the universe remains the same. Those who die are born into a new different form. Forms change, but the total amount of universal stuff remains the same. It is said that there are 8.4 million species which are nothing but forms. Now here is one word in this slok that deserves further attention. It is avasaha, which means helplessly. Lord Krishna says that all beings, whether they are plants, animals or humans, are helplessly stuck in this wheel of birth and rebirth, otherwise known as the wheel of sansar. If they do not actively pursue a spiritual path, whatever that path may be, they will never come out of this cycle. Most of us get frustrated if we get stuck in an elevator for more than a few minutes. Imagine how frustrated we should get if we find out that we are stuck somewhere for an infinite amount of time. So how exactly do we escape from this situation? We shall see in the next slok, which reads, "But there exists another supreme, timeless, unmanifest beyond that other unmanifest, which, after destruction of all beings, is not destroyed." Lord Krishna spoke about the endless cycle of creation and dissolution of the universe. All living and non-living beings go into a state of suspended animation for 4.32 billion years, after which they come back into manifest mode for another 4.32 billion years. But there is one more thing. There are a select few beings that escape this endless cycle. They are the ones who are liberated. He informs us that there is something beyond this cycle of creation and dissolution, something that transcends time and space. In other words, everything in this world is transitory and will eventually lead to sorrow. Unless we realize that everything that we think will give us happiness is subject to destruction sooner or later, we will never become aware that there is something beyond our materialistic pursuits. This another unmanifest is explained further in verse number 8.21, which reads, "He who is called unmanifest and imperishable, he who has been spoken of as the supreme goal, having attained him, beings do not return. That is my supreme abode." Earlier in this chapter, Lord Krishna had mentioned that those who attain Ishwar are not subject to further rebirth. In this slok, he says that the other unmanifest that remains unaffected by the day and night of Lord Brahma is nothing but Ishwar. He also mentions that the nature of Ishwar as imperishable, unmanifest and supreme. With this slok, we come back to the main theme that began in 7th chapter, which is Ishwar. After having explained that this universe is subject to cycles of creation and dissolution, and that unless we take effort we are stuck in this infinite cycle, Lord Krishna reiterates the need for the pursuit of Ishwar as the means of liberation. So therefore, for the seeker who performs karma yoga and upasana or devotion towards Ishwar, attains Ishwar after he has completed his time on earth and in the abode of Lord Brahma. Shri Krishna summarizes the means of attaining Ishwar in the next slok, which also concludes the topic of liberation from rebirth. So verse number 8.22 reads, "That supreme person in whom all beings are included, by whom all this is pervaded, is obtained through single-pointed devotion." The detail around the creation and dissolution of the universe was meant to highlight the notion that only through liberation can we rise above the endless cycle. Lord Krishna gives us the means for liberation as well as the attributes of the goal, which is Ishwar. He says that liberation is obtained through single-pointed devotion to Ishwar. Single-pointed devotion was covered in chapter 6. However, here it is meant to include not just devotion but also karma yoga. If the karma yoga aspect is missing, our vasanas or latent desires will remain unfulfilled, pulling us back into the cycle of rebirth so that they will be fulfilled. Now, what is Ishwar's connection to creation and dissolution? Ultimately, Ishwar is the cause of all creation, but he is not someone who stands outside this creation. Now, the classic example referenced in this context is that of the potter and the pot. The potter creates the pot out of clay, but remains outside the pot, distinct from the pot. Ishwar is not like that. He is like the ocean that creates waves. The waves are pervaded by the ocean and are also included in the ocean. So is the case with Ishwar. Therefore, Ishwar is everywhere and ever present. That is, he is beyond space and beyond time. He begins the last topic of this chapter in the next slok. He describes two paths that seekers have to travel after they pass away. So in verse number 8.23 he says, "But the path of no return for a yogi who is leaving his body, and also the path of return, I shall speak about those, O Seon of the Bharats." As we've seen earlier that journey differs from person to person, it is determined solely by two things: how we have acted and how we have thought. In other words, our actions and our thoughts in this life decide what happens in our next life. In this chapter, Lord Krishna has spoken about two kinds of people. The first category of people are those who perform good actions in their lives. The second category of people are those who are solely devoted to Ishwar in addition to performing good actions. This is Lord Krishna speaks about two paths in this slok. Each category travels on a different path after death. In the next two shlokas, each of these paths is explained in further detail. One path leads to liberation, which means that those who attain this path do not come back. They are not born again. The other path leads to rebirth or return. So verse number 8.24 reads, "Fire, light, day, the bright. The northern movement comprising 6 months, those people who have departed through that path, knowers of Brahma, attain Brahma." Here, Lord Krishna speaks about the path taken by those who have practiced single-pointed devotion to Ishwar, indicated by the phrase knowers of Brahma. It is said that Ishwar has appointed special deities to guide the Jeev to the abode of Lord Brahma after its body has ceased to function. Agni, Jyoti, Shukla and Uttarayan are symbols that indicate that deities who preside over fire, light and lunar fortnight and the 6 months period between winter and summer. The Jeev resides in Lord Brahma's abode until dissolution, after which it is liberated. In other words, it attains Brahma. In India, Uttarayan is considered highly auspicious. Its beginning is celebrated with the Makar Sankranti festival. The lunar fortnight of each month is also the time in which most Indian festivals are celebrated, including Navratri and Guru Purnima. Further in 8.25 he says, "Smoke, night, darkness and the southern movement comprising 6 months. The yogi travels through that path, attains the light of the moon to return." Shri Krishna describes the path of the Jeev who has performed good deeds in his lifetime but had not practiced devotion. This path is called the path of moon or the lunar path. The Jeev is guided on this path by deities who preside over the smoke of the pyre, night, the dark lunar fortnight, and 6 months between summer and winter. Having traveled through the lunar path, these Jeevs attain a lower realm called Chandralok or the abode of moon. In modern language, this is nothing but heaven. The Jeev enjoys heavenly pleasures, which are the fruits of his earthly actions. Unlike the Jeev in Lord Brahma's abode, this Jeev returns to earth once the fruits of his good action have depleted. Both the dark lunar fortnight and the period between summer and winter are relatively less auspicious than their brighter counterparts. But many festivals, including MAHABHARAT, is celebrated during the dark lunar fortnight. Verse number 8.26 reads, "For bright and dark, both these paths have been known since eternity. By one, the traveler does not have to return. By the other, he has to return again." Lord Krishna spoke about two paths that the Jeev takes after death. The bright path that goes to the abode of Brahm and the dark path that goes to the abode of the moon. He now reaffirms the difference between these two paths by saying that those who travel by the bright path are liberated, whereas those who take the dark path are born again after spending time in the abode of the moon. He also states that these paths have been established since time immemorial. These two paths take care of two categories of people. One category is those who perform good actions as well as single-pointed devotion. They attain the abode of Lord Brahma. The other is those who perform good actions. They attain heaven. But absent from this list are those who perform negative actions that harm others and themselves. What happens to them? Lord Krishna has omitted the path of such people, probably because he assumes that one who is interested in following the path of Karma Yoga is putting forth effort to eliminate negative and destructive actions from his life. More information on the path taken by such people is provided in the Gita. So then what is the significance of these two paths to us? Let us see in verse number 8.27, which reads, knowing both these paths, any yogi is not deluded, O Parth. Therefore remain engaged in yoga at all times, O Arjun. Lord Krishna starts to conclude the topic of Jeev's journey after death. He says that those who have knowledge of the fate of the Jeev after death are not deluded or misinformed. With this knowledge, we can change his behavior on earth in order to qualify for the right path after our death. Of the two paths mentioned in this chapter, there is one that led to liberation. Lord Krishna advises us to follow the path of selfless action combined with single-pointed devotion. In other words, Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. This is indicated by the phrase remain engaged in yoga in the shlok. All of this knowledge has already been explained to us. Karma Yoga was the theme for the first 6 chapters, and Bhakti Yoga is the theme for chapter 7 through 12. We have a choice. We can either read these chapters with an intellectual bent, or we can actually put the teachings to practice in our lives by remaining engaged in yoga at all times. The choice is up to us. Lord Krishna summarizes and concludes this chapter in 8.28, which reads, whatever auspicious results have been indicated in the Vedas, rituals, austerities, and also in charity, the yogi transcends all these, having known this knowledge, and attains the primal supreme state. Lord Krishna concludes the 8th chapter with this shlok. He tells us that he has spelled out an entire flowchart for the afterlife. With this knowledge, we have the means to achieve anything including heaven, rebirth, and liberation. The outcome solely depends upon our behavior while we are alive. Traditionally, seekers used the instructions in the Vedas to perform rituals, austerities, and charity. Many of them did so with the goal of attaining a better state in the afterlife. In our case, even though we may not perform rituals per se, our goal is similar. We try to do good actions and charities so that we can earn punya or merit for the afterlife. However, we know now that mere performance of good actions will get us to heaven, but we will eventually come back once our merits are exhausted. So therefore, Lord Krishna recommends the bright path of devotion and action that leads us to the abode of Lord Brahma and eventually into liberation. This path of graduated liberation, indicated by the phrase supreme primal state, is also known as karma mukti. One who achieves this path transcends or goes beyond the result of heaven because he attains liberation, which frees him from finitude. So in summary, in the 7th chapter, Lord Krishna gave a detailed description of Ishwar and stressed the importance of recognizing the infinite aspect of Ishwar. The 8th chapter took a bit of a detour from that topic. In the beginning of this chapter, Arjun raised 7 questions that Lord Krishna answered in this chapter. The key question was, how does one attain Ishwar after death, which became the main topic of this chapter. Lord Krishna began this topic by asserting that the thought of the time of death determines our fate. If the thought is of Ishwar, we will attain Ishwar. Since we will not know when our death occurs, he advises us to meditate upon our Ishwar throughout our lives, so it automatically becomes our final thought. To help us cultivate this thought, Lord Krishna elaborated upon 3 types of meditation. The first type of meditation was on the cosmic form of Ishwar, and the second type was on the name of Ishwar, which is Om. Both these meditation techniques also required us to exercise control of our pran or life forces. Since this is beyond most of our capabilities, Lord Krishna recommended the third type of meditation, which was much simpler. He advises us to remember Ishwar in any form, but to do so constantly throughout our life. So then what happens when we die? Lord Krishna said that the universe is like an infinite cycle of creation and dissolution, symbolically depicted as the day and night of Lord Brahma. Both the day and night are each 4.32 billion years long. At the end of each day of Lord Brahma, all living and non-living beings become unmanifest. when the night of Lord Brahma ends, all those beings are manifest again. In other words, they are frozen at the end of the day and they thaw in the beginning of the day. This goes on infinitely. Having known this, our state is pitiable. We are caught in the endless cycle of creation and dissolution. Only those beings who only put forth the effort come out of this endless cycle. They attain Ishwar and transcend this cycle. So urging us to take steps towards achieving liberation in the refrain of this chapter and of the Gita as a whole. Towards the end of the chapter, Lord Krishna enumerated the two paths that a jiva or soul takes after death. The first path is the dark path, which is attained by those who have performed good actions on this earth. They attain the abode of moon. After exhausting the results of their actions, they return to this world and are reborn. The second path is the bright path, which is attained by those who have practiced devoted meditation on Ishwar in addition to performing good actions. They attain the abode of Lord Brahma and remain there until its dissolution, when they are eventually liberated. We are encouraged to take up this path. This concludes the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The links to the other chapters have been provided in the description box. Hit the like button if you like the explanation, consider subscribing to OM Dharma YouTube channel, and share the video with your loved ones. Peace.